Good morning and welcome to the March 10th, 2016 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. Housekeeping items: if any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda, there are speaker request forms located to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the secretary. At this time, we would like to ask that any member of the audience has a cell phone, please turn it to silent or turn it off. If you need to take a call, please step out into the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Today on the agenda, we have just the approval of the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes from February 25th. Look for a motion.
Move approval.
Karen made the motion, Andy seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn from.
All right. Karen made the motion to adjourn. Jan seconded. All those in favor of adjourning? Opposed? We are adjourned from the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. That moves us to the agenda for the Planning Commission meeting for March 10th, 2016. We'll start this with the consent calendar. Items 1 through 11 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision with the exception of the following items. Item 4, 16 PD 004, and item 5, 16 PD 006. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on these items are final unless any party appeals that decision to the City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Community Planning and Development Services Department by the close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 11 that staff would like removed from the consent calendar?
Items 9 and 10, please.
Okay. Are there any items 1 through 11 that any planning commissioner would like removed?
11.
Okay. Others? And are there any items, I guess we're down to 1 through 8, that the audience would like removed for separate consideration? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 8 in accordance with staff recommendations. Linda made the motion. Andy seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go to item number 9.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be abstaining from items 9 and 10.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could we take items 9 and 10 concurrently?
Sure.
Items number 9 and 10 are requested rezonings from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district for properties which are owned by the West Hills Village Retirement Community. The West Hills Village has purchased said properties, and they're along Nebraska Street, off of 5th Street, and on south side of Texas Street, Freedom Court. Let me see if I can get this laptop one. Sorry, having some technical difficulties.
Well, it looks good on this little laptop, let me tell you.
We also appreciate the light show.
So sorry. We'll just put an overhead up and we'll show you the two properties and speak to the issues from there.
There we go. So property is located on the southeast, West Hills Village is located on the southeast corner of Texas and 5th Street. The highlighted areas in red are the two proposed rezonings, RZ004 and RZ005, going from low-density residential district to medium-density residential district for a proposed expansion for West Hills Village. Now, the rezoning is required because low-density residential district does not support the number of assisted living units in this facility, so to go to MDR is to exceed the limited number in LDR. This does not give them immediate permission to start construction. This is the first step. The applicant has indicated that West Hills Village is proposing to submit an initial plan development, which will approve, seeking approval of the major amendment to expand the assisted living facility, and they'll be platting in the future to create one large lot. Comprehensive plan identifies housing for special populations in Rapid City. To the north of this is the Rapid City Regional Hospital. This is a good location for a retirement community. The applicant has indicated that the properties which are currently developed with single-family dwellings will continue to be used as single-family dwellings until such time as they're ready to move forward with the future development. So also having the rezoning, the existing uses aren't going to be in conflict, but the future expansion will still require an amendment or an initial plan development and a final plan development. The initial will come in because when they want to plat, it'll be having all those single-family dwellings on one lot, so to allow that use to continue until they're ready to expand. There have been a lot of calls of concern from the neighborhood and a lot of neighbors in the audience today. Just to let everyone know that when this does come forward, we've notified the applicant that drainage is a big issue that we'll be looking at as they come forward with applications. So for the reasons noted in the staff report, staff is recommending that the rezonings be approved, and the applicant and their representatives are here to give us a little more information if we need it. So are there any questions for staff at this time?
I don't see any. We have a number of speaker request forms on these items. I'll go to those, I think. Nathan Denholm.
First up, I've lived in Freedom Court for...
If you could speak from the microphone, I'd appreciate it.
My name is Nathan Denham. I live at 3718 Freedom Court. I will be one of two new side door neighbors to West Hills Village when this process is complete. I'm not here to speak against at this point, but it's my understanding that, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that once this rezoning is complete, it's pretty certain that I'm going to have West Hills Village as my next door neighbor. So I'm here to speak and ask you to perhaps slow down the process just a little bit. I feel like once this is done, I'll have very little to say about this, really. Now, I've been told, yeah, you can make some comments in this plan development, but I worked for city government for 23 years, and I know what that means. You can make your comments. It doesn't mean that anything's going to change because of it. And so I'm concerned that perhaps we ought to slow the process down just a little bit. I spoke with Mr. Reinecke, and we're trying to work something out between the two of us. I think I'm in a unique position along with one other person in this, in that we have the ultimate concern that there's no way of knowing until there's a plan whether or not there could be a huge building 12 feet away from our house. Now, Mr. Reinecke assures me that that's not his intention, and I'm sure he has good intentions. But I also remember before West Hills was there at all, I was there. I've lived there since my house was brand new. And West Hills came in and made a request to build their facility to start with, and the model that they had is still there over on 5th Street. It was going to be duplexes. And go look at that facility and see if you can find a duplex anywhere. It's 3-story buildings. I was a little miffed with that when it happened, and hey, nothing to be done. I learned from that. Once the rezoning is complete, you no longer know what's going to happen. Mr. Reinecke himself admits he doesn't know what's going to happen because his plan isn't complete yet. So I'm concerned that perhaps we could slow down just a little bit. He can't build anything without a plan, so he really doesn't need zoning this moment. And that would be my request, that we just slow down, give the process a little bit more time for people to see what's going on before we do this.
Thank you. John Ankowiak, I hope I didn't murder your last name too bad.
No, you did pretty well. My name is John Ankowiak, and I live at 3701 Arizona Street. I'm just around the corner from this rezoning area, and my property backs up on Mr. Denholm's. My concerns are several. First off is that I'm downslope from West Hills Village, and the high peak of my roof is probably at ground level for what West Hills Village is. So my concern is drainage. I get a lot of drainage off of that hill back there and into my backyard, and I'm concerned with placement of the building, how much they're going to use as parking area, where is all that water going to go, and if it ends up in my backyard, who's going to be responsible for taking care of the erosion and that type of thing that may happen down there. So I'm very concerned about the drainage situation. I'm concerned about the placement of the buildings. If they're overshadowing my property, what does that do to my property values and the ability for me to sell if I ever get to that point? And I've lived there for almost 29 and a half years, so I'm not really interested in moving, but I'm concerned about these issues. When I first moved in, most of the development on Teresita Hills had not started. And once it did start, I noticed that there was a change in the drainage off of that hillside and down Texas and Arizona Street to where I was getting water in, and I got water in my basement, and I had to put in 2 sump pumps. So I've got a big concern with being downslope and so low, and some of my neighbors next to me are even lower than I am, and their sump pumps run more than mine does. So I'm really concerned about what the drainage is going to do down there. So between that, property values, placement of the buildings, I, like Mr. Denholm, think that we ought to slow down and get a building plan before we allow rezoning. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Kroll.
I'm Doug Kroll, and I live at 114 Centennial Street. West Hills is my neighbor to the west, and now they will be if this rezoning goes through, my neighbor to the north. Okay? I have no problem with West Hills. My biggest concern is like the rest of these. When they did their last addition, I ended up with water all through my yard, into my basement, you know. I addressed it with them. They came out and made some changes. So my concern is, what are we gonna do? Because if you look at my backyard, they're probably 10, 12 feet higher than my backyard. So I think everything's gonna come there. You know, how high are the buildings, just like these guys were talking about? Those are my concerns. I want to stay there. The neighborhood likes being residential, low density, you know, a lot of people have lived there a long time. When this letter came out, I was telling these folks, you know, I tried to eat supper that night. When I got the letter, I had 5 people knocking on my door because I'm the closest to West Hills. So those are just my biggest concerns is, you know, let's make sure we take care of the drainage situations and the traffic and all that stuff. That's what everybody's concerned about in my neighborhood.
Thank you. Bob Hauer?
I'm Bob Hauer. I live at 123 Nebraska Street, and I've been in my house for 29 and a half years also. And experienced flooding 3 years when West Hills Village began to construct their assisted living facility, and 3 summers or 3 Mays, 1996, 97, 98, experienced flooding. Finally had to have my basement professionally taken care of with a sump pump. And I know numerous people down Nebraska Street farther from me experienced flooding also. And so I'd like to see the drainage issue addressed. And also, my front window would look out right at the construction. So I'm just across the street from the proposed construction. I too would like to see a master plan as to the size of the building and how that might affect my property value also. Thank you.
Thank you. Daryl Reinecke?
Let you show this.
Maybe we can do the overall first. Let you talk.
Good morning. My name is Joe Reinecke. I'm with West Hills Village. I've been with West Hills Village since it opened 32 years ago. So we've been part of the neighborhood for quite some time and certainly want to hopefully do a better job of addressing some of the questions that were brought up this morning. And as mentioned, we're just in the beginning stages, so we don't have a lot of information, but we do certainly have some. Over the past few years, we've had some of the neighbors come to us as we let them know we were interested in possibly acquiring some property around us, and we've worked out 8 homes to the east of us regarding the property that we're talking about today. I have Kim Schmidt with Upper Deck, who we're partnering with on the development of this assisted living facility, and also Steve McCarthy, who serves on our board of directors here in the audience as well. Our goal, and as you can see from the map or layout there, is to take the homes and put an assisted living facility there. We feel this would be a very nice transition strip, even more improved than what we currently have between the neighborhood and us, as this is a 1-story building, 1 story on the north, and because of the slope, there would be almost like a walkout basement style of effect on the south side. So our intention is to keep it very low profile and also do a residential look. And we don't have anything to show you today because we haven't started that, but we've got good plans in place in our first initial designs to make that look and fit very well, we feel, into the neighborhood. Something we're known for and that we would continue to do is we've, of course, over the years put a tremendous amount of effort on landscaping, walking paths, and a lot of environmental kinds of steps that we've taken with our plantings and shrubbery and things like that. And certainly we would continue along those same fashions. So this is kind of hot off the press, as Kim brought this with her this morning. This would be an initial layout of how we think a facility of this style could fit in that property. We're well aware that in our area we have to address the drainage and are taking all the steps that are required to do that. We certainly do not want to impact anyone's property, ours and those around us, with any kind of water issues, and fully realize that whatever the plan calls for, we would have to put in place as well. And we've continued to do that over the years as we have made improvements or added on. We've added retaining ponds and things like that on our current property to address some of those things. So our goal is to get more into the plan development of this, so there's more specifics to it. But right now our intentions are, or our best example of our intentions is what we've brought here this morning. We know it's critical that we fit into the neighborhood and that we become a good transition strip between West Hills and the neighbors. And we've worked on that for 32 years, and I think have pretty good relationships with everyone in our neighborhood as well. So, any questions?
Thank you. Any of the commissioners have questions for Mr. Reineke? Karen?
Mr. Reineke, I don't necessarily have a question. I can understand the expansion of West Hills, and I think it's a beautiful facility out there, and I don't think the neighbors question that. I think the question is not just the drainage, but having a building, a large building next to them when they're in a residential area, and I can understand that truly, and that would be a concern of mine. If this does pass this morning, I can tell you that the neighbors will be here for the plan development if it's not something that they like, and we will definitely look at it very closely to make sure that it fits in with the neighborhood. And I think that's what you've stated, that's your opinion, that's what you want to do. But I know things can change too, and I can understand the apprehension of the people in the audience. So just wanted to let you know that we would definitely take a serious look at what the plans are.
Certainly, and we would expect that, and I think we can, our intention is rise to that occasion and meet those expectations as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any further questions or comments from the commission for staff or any of the other folks? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion then on the rezoning, items 9 and 10. Galen made the motion to approve. Jan seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to pass 9 and 10. That moves us to item 11. Karen?
Mr. Chair, I would recuse myself from this motion or this vote.
Thank you. I believe that's the only reason item 11 was pulled. Vicki, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Casey Peterson's going to be coming around in that door. He was just here visiting with me.
Okay.
We can get him a second to get back to his chair. He was going to ask, he had come to check if that had been acted on already.
Okay.
He does want to speak to the project as well as, oh, there, I think she's going to go get him. But he would like to speak to item 11, and then we have another item later on in the agenda that is for a development plan for the project. And Casey, item 11 has not been acted on yet, so if you would like to speak to it, if you could approach the microphone and give your name and address, please, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vicki.
Thank you very much.
My name is Casey Peterson. I live at 8588 Dreamscape Road. If you're not familiar with it, there's 3 houses on the road. It sits directly east of the Forest Service building. In that area, we have 9 neighbors, 2 of which received the notice and saw the signs that were put up. The signs were put up on the south side of Samus Trail. There's only 2 houses that are in that direction. We called planning on Friday. The signs were relocated, but that was late Friday, so we have neighbors that wanted to appear that could not get here. So it makes it difficult when you live in an area that is zoned ag or limited ag, and the notice distance is 250 feet. If you have 10 or 40 acres, you're hundreds to thousands of feet from this project. So we feel a little under pressure because we weren't, I think, properly informed. I think your rules on notice need to change as you get to the outer areas of Rapid City because of the distances that people live from each other. I will probably also like to speak to item 16 in terms of I think it's a plan development app. But I think I'll start with what is my general theme here. If you've been around Rapid City very long, and I know there's some people that have been born and raised here, when you went up Highway 16 and you got to the top of the hill, it was a spectacular view. You saw nothing but the Black Hills. As you come down 16, you will notice and have seen the changes that have been made. It's probably one of the most scenic corridors we have besides Spearfish Canyon and Needles Highway and Iron Mountain. Or I should say maybe it was one of the most scenic highways into the Black Hills. I was on the Planning Commission in the 80s. I respect what's done, but I also see from a user standpoint some of the things that happen. You probably are all familiar with the Walmart application that was ultimately fell apart out there. It had a TIF. You have approved, and that TIF has been built out. I came to that hearing. I didn't really have a big objection, but there's some things I've seen now that concern me. That area is one of the areas in Rapid City where you have dark nights. If you drive out there at night, it is the most highly lit area of Highway 16 that you can see. And there are 9 houses to the east, and that's it. When you go to the west, you have the Forest Service building, you have the Mormon church. There's not any type of that kind of lighting to the west. So I am saddened that that lighting is in there. If you go out there, you'll see what I mean. I'm not sure if anybody's been out there. As you come down 16, you'll see a mix of what maybe we're trying to be tourists or maybe we're trying to be scenic. Kudos to NAU/IGT. That's a beautiful spot. I think Black Hills Corp is going to be the same. But as you look at Coleman, as you look at the maze, as you look at the ranch, which is going to become now Great Communication, happy about that. You look at the water slide, you'll see this conflict of what does Rapid City want to be? Back when we were contesting the Walmart site, we asked the city to do a smart growth study. We were happy, obviously, that it didn't pass, that didn't go ahead, but we're also happy that there was a scenic overlay, that as part of our negotiations and working through the process, the city planning and council approved a scenic overlay. To my chagrin, I missed a comprehensive plan redo, and that scenic overlay is gone. Now, the scenic overlay was there to make sure that Walmart built something that was compatible with a mountain setting with meadows and pastures and trees. It limited heights, it limited certain types of materials.
Mr. Peterson, I apologize to interrupt, but if you could try to address the application at hand, we would appreciate it.
Given that that scenic overlay was there, the neighbors were happy with what's going on. Now it's been rezoned and recomprehensive planned, and I don't think anybody's happy with it. You have spot zoning out there. If you go just to the southeast, there is a zoning that was approved a long time ago. It's a multi-density housing. I realize that you have a commercial corridor, you try to have a buffer zone, and then lower density housing. But you've had spotted housing out there, so we're not thrilled about having 8 buildings, 20 residents, 160 units out there. You're going to put 600 plus people there, and you have one way out. You're going to congest the area. If there's ever a fire, it's going to be a difficulty to get out. And so I would be opposed to the zoning, but I also came prepared to talk to item 16, which is the actual plan development.
This zoning is for general commercial to office commercial, correct, Vicki? Maybe you could comment on just the application at hand here.
You are correct. The application at hand is is to go to office commercial. And it is unfortunate that Casey did miss that land use plan for the adoption of the comprehensive plan, identifying what the appropriate future land uses would be for this area. As you can see, the rezone is shown with the arrow, and it is identified as a mixed-use commercial. So a high-end commercial is identified as appropriate for all of the land on both sides of 16 throughout this corridor. And I'll remind you that over on Moon Meadows, Planning Commission recently approved for a warehouse development that will have lighting and signage, et cetera, that will be west of 16, south of Moon Meadows. And you have an item later on the agenda that will speak to the proposed land use, which is an apartment development, and it will have a lower height than what would otherwise be allowed in general commercial. For our purposes today, our recommendation is that the proposed rezone is in compliance with the future land use plan. Rezoning it doesn't allow for the development of the apartments. Item 16 will speak specific to that. And I believe Mr. Peterson will stick around for that discussion as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission regarding the proposed rezone for item number 11?
A quick question. So we're rezoning to office commercial, right?
Yes.
I think it's important to note that office commercial is one of the most restrictive zoning districts that there is. Is that fair to say? That office commercial is one of the most restrictive zoning districts that we have. It's more restrictive than general commercial. General commercial is more restrictive than light industrial, et cetera, et cetera. So I think opposite of item number 16 and your opinion of that, I feel that this really does help address maybe some of your buffer because it does highly restrict what can happen there. So that was my comment.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, the chair would entertain a motion on item number 11. Linda makes a motion to approve. Second. Galen seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'll be abstaining from item number 12.
Okay. Item number 12.
Good morning. At your previous Planning Commission meeting, you approved a motion to create a tax increment district for Black Hills Corporation. Give me just a minute, I'll get this going correctly. Otherwise, we're just going to go with, the screen that we have here. Anyway, the boundary here that we're looking at is at the southwest corner of Catron and Highway 16. And before you today is the project plan associated with this particular tax increment district. During the very preliminary discussions with reference to this possible tax increment district, those discussions have always been to encourage and support Black Hills Corporation so that they maintain the corporate headquarters here in Rapid City and also to find a way to expand their employment base. And generally, as some of you may know, but typically the tax increment district funds have always been to encourage and use those funds for construction of public improvements. back in 2011, the state law changed to allow grant payments. And there is a link to the agenda summary that is some correspondence from our city attorney's office regarding this new process, and it does support the new options that we now have available. Okay, we'll go with a different process. Maybe. There we go. So here before you, okay, well, oh, look at that. Okay, we're good. Look at us go. Don't we love technology? So before you here is the new language from state law that identifies some new descriptions. This one is specific to blight. Generally, in the past, all of our districts were created not only to use those funds for public improvements, but they've mostly been considered. We've considered blight as the criteria on whether it's appropriate or not. Now we have the availability to consider not just blight, but if more than 50% of an area creates economic development and also supports economic development across the state, we can look at that tool and that definition as we look at our project plans in our districts. And so this is another piece of the state law language that identifies how we can actually implement our project plans. And highlighted here, I've got at the very end of that line, it talks about a municipality where we can use grants as a payback for our project plan. And then the very last item here, this is also another piece of language that was added in 2011. Number 8 is specific to this project: payments and grants made at the discretion of the governing body, which are found to be necessary or convenient to the creation of the district or the implementation of project plans. And so, there's always been a question about, actually with this particular plan, I know that there's some discussion in our community regarding how this tax increment proposal has come forward so far. How does it meet our local criteria? I've already talked about how it's meeting the state requirements, but here items number 3 and 4 are specific to this plan. They are not in direct competition with any other existing service or retail business, and they propose to bring in new or expanded employment opportunities. And one of the things that I referenced at the last meeting is the purpose of this particular TIF. The employee count, the existing employee count that they identified that they're going to consolidate at their corporation office is 550 employees, and we're talking about adding 150 spaces to this new facility in addition to those current 550. And just to give you an idea of what the economic benefit is for our community for those existing and proposed potential employees, it's not quite $60 million, and that's just for their average salary for the existing employees. And so then some more of our local criterion, numbers 1 and 2, they do comply with our current comp plan with the proposed location, and the use of these funds will not result in any kind of net loss for pre-existing tax revenues. There's also some allowable costs that I wanted you to look at. Number 12 are at the discretion of the governing body, which are found to be necessary or convenient to the creation of the tax increment district. And then, just so you know, there are some costs that are specifically not allowed unless council authorizes them, and there's a whole list of them. It's the acquisition of land, private development site improvements, real property assembly costs, clearing and grading, relocation, organization, any kind of professional fees that are not specifically related to an approved piece in the project plan, any alteration, remodeling, or repair of existing buildings or structures, and any kind of legal or developer fees. So all 9 of those have to be specifically approved by council before they can be authorized in a project plan. And so again, here's the boundary. This is, there are some requirements in state law when you're considering a project plan. You have to identify what the existing zoning is. And so the existing zoning is identified as general commercial. A portion of the property has a planned development boundary on it. Here is the existing land use that's required. As you saw from the aerial photo, the property is currently vacant. Most of the area around it, the light gray, represents a vacant property. There is a single-family structure immediately to the south of the proposed location. There's some offices, an industrial use, and then some general commercial uses or retail uses to the north, northeast. And this is our comprehensive plan. It also has to, the project plan or the project has to comply with our existing comp plan. You'll see the property is identified as a mixed-use commercial, and on the left-hand side of the screen it identifies several uses, including business and professional offices. There is a community activity center right there at the corner at the intersection of Catron and 16, so that we've got a concentration of local services and offices, employment uses really. And then our entrance corridor talks specifically about several things that we want to encourage, because this is a way in and out to our beautiful Black Hills. Number 3, as you'll see, is to protect our scenic views, landscaping, and the natural character rather than intense development. And then this again is another piece of our existing comprehensive plan. It identifies our major street plan. You'll see a portion of the property has a principal arterial running through that. And as part of their overall project plan, they anticipate constructing that arterial, which is called Les Hollers Way, to an arterial standard. A couple pictures for you. This is from the entrance right at Les Hollers Drive, looking to the east. You can see Catron Boulevard on the left. This is a picture just south of the property, looking to the west, kind of northwest. This is, you can see the location of Energy Park Drive, which will be their connection from Les Hollers to the service road on the south portion of their property. And then this is a picture looking to the north into town. This is also a picture of their headquarters site plan. You can see, where the road's going to be constructed here, Les Hollers Drive. Here is Energy Park Drive, and then the 2 structures that they are currently building. Excuse me. If you go out there now, this is actually the location that you can see those large steel pieces going up. If you looked at the project plan, like I said, this is a whole new area that we're going into now, because we're looking at a grant, and we're looking at tying that grant actually to the construction of those additional 150 office spaces. We did receive from them actual cost estimates, bids that they have received for the improvements of those. The interior includes finishing out their shell that they're constructing now, with their floor coverings, their walls, their ceilings, their lighting, all of their communication requirements, furniture, and all of those things associated with completing those spaces. In here, based on the state law that we talked about before, you can see the fees that the city charges for implementing the project plan, and then the discretionary costs associated with the grant that we're anticipating. The interior build-out of those workspaces is $3.2 million. The interest on that is $2.8. The administrative cost is $20, and so this is a project plan that estimates just a little over $6 million in approved costs. And I know that we talked about this before, but this actually is the piece of the pie that goes towards paying out those anticipated costs that are within the approved project plan. And these costs here actually still go to the city, the school, the state, and the water district that collects taxes. So, when the new structure comes in, this actually is the piece of the pie that goes towards those funds, the repayment of the project plan. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, there is an underlying tax increment district. It's number 70, and it was approved to construct the sewer main, Moon Meadows, and then the traffic signal here. And when there is an overlapping district, any funds generated from the subsequent district always goes to pay the first district that was approved. And then once that district is paid off, then all of the funds will be directed to the next district created. And here's a public improvements map for District 70. And then, I like pictures, so here's our current photo from the property from 2015. And I know this is really difficult to see, but it identifies, in that picture that I just showed you with the overlapping districts, this area here is Buffalo Crossing. When it is fully constructed as anticipated, it will have an estimated taxable value increase of $85 million. This is District 70 with the apartment buildings proposed on Moon Meadows. That increase is just a little over $10 million. And then Black Hills Corp, once their structure is finished, that estimate is not quite $74 million. And then the associated taxes on those will go to pay for District 70 first, and then it will go toward those different districts. So here, this information here identifies how soon we anticipate District 70 paying off because of the improvements from the apartment building for District 70 that Hague is proposing, because of Black Hills Corporation's investment into TID 70, and then also Buffalo Crossing estimates that are going. So in the end, we anticipate that this particular project plan will pay off in about 17 years. And so there's always a question about, how much money we have invested into tax increment districts. State law requires that we cannot go over a 10% valuation within our TIDs. At the end of 2015, it was 2.9%. With these two districts that not only Black Hills Court, but then Buffalo Crossing across the road, we anticipate that to be at 3.2%. So we're well within that 10% limit. And again, excuse me, here's a picture of Black Hills Corp site plan. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, but we do recommend approval of the project plan using that as a grant payment, and we will, I anticipate, tie that grant payment to the improvements and the completion of those 150 spaces so that, we encourage Black Hills Corp to stay here in town, but then we also encourage them to bring more people into town.
Thank you, Patsy. I do have a couple speaker request forms. Jafar Kareem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the Commission. My name is Jafar Karim. I live and work here in Rapid City. I work for Black Hills Corporation. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you again here today. We thank the Commission for your consideration and creation of the district a couple of weeks ago, and then also in the consideration of this project plan as staff has laid out and explained and is in your packet. As staff explained, this is really about that growth opportunity that we believe is imminent here and is a possibility if we're able to put additional dollars into our planned headquarters building. Again, this is a multi-state headquarters that we're siting here today. We're located in 5 locations across Rapid City with approximately 500 employees. We have the opportunity to add to that. And so that's really the question that is in play for us here today, and what this TIF would address and the plan specifically would address. We do appreciate willingness to look at this tool that was created in statute and then how this can be done in a way that directly addresses that incremental job growth. We think we have developed a responsible plan. Obviously, that's important. We've used conservative estimates in the revenue projections. We're very concerned about our community as well. We're excited about the additional economic investment that our employees and additional employees could bring to the community and what that means, not only to the businesses in this community, but then also to our tax base, whether it's sales tax, property taxes, on down the line, and what that means to our community and what we do to volunteer and contribute to the community as well. So again, I want to say thank you for your consideration of the plan. The details are there in front of you, but if there's anything that we can answer, we'd be happy to do that here today. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a request from Benjamin Snow. If questions on economic development, is there anything you'd like to say at this point?
Thank you and good morning. My name is Benjamin Snow, and I serve as the president for the Rapid City Area Economic Development Corporation. And I'm just here to give this project and this company more credit than perhaps we have given them to date. And I want to just emphasize a couple of factors on why we are so excited about what's happening down on this corridor and why the consolidation of Black Hills Corporation and the potential for expansion on this site is phenomenal for not just Rapid City, but for the entire Rushmore region. And the points I want to make really have to do with what we call in economic development parlance is economic multipliers. And Jeff mentioned a little bit of this, and Patsy mentioned a little bit of this, but I would like everybody to just consider that when you state what a company provides in direct payroll, that's only a small part of the total economic picture of what happens when you support a project like this. There's also the level of wage that is paid here. All jobs are not created equal. The average salary for Rapid City workers is about $35,000. A great job in Rapid City would be someone who's making maybe $50,000 a year. An outstanding job in this community would be what this company is providing our community. And the higher those wages go, the more impactful that is and the more powerful the ripple effect is in our economy. So when you take a base level of wage and then you consider all of the, those are called direct jobs, and then you consider the indirect jobs, those are jobs that are created because of direct supply chain and contract relationships a company has. And then there's inferred jobs, and that's the whole smattering of retail services and insurance and finance and all the things that come because you have an economy with these higher wages. This project represents a tremendous ripple effect. So please, when you're considering the economic impact to our economy, it's easily 4 to 5 times what just those basic numbers are directly from the company because of this powerful ripple effect that happens. And it's important to note that that economic impact is felt every year for many years. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from the Planning Commission? Any comments? I actually had a couple questions. I was trying to give you guys the run, but there's a motion from Jan on the floor to approve and a second from Linda. This is a new process, and I don't have any issues with the project, but this type of a TIF we haven't seen before, as Patsy noted. I guess I'm curious. First, maybe we could get a quick summary from the attorney of that memo, just on how you feel the grant meets the TIF definition now.
Yes, thank you. One of the options, like Patsy pointed out, one of the options as for how project costs are paid is through the use of a grant. This is something that hasn't been done in Rapid City, but it has been done elsewhere in the state. It's a little different in that what Black Hills Corp will need to show and provide to the city in order to be paid pursuant to this grant will be found in a development agreement between the city and the developer, which in this case is Black Hills Corp. That's something that we'll be working on in the near future, the terms of that agreement. But the payments would come through the TIF just like all of the other payments have been made through our other TIFs, where the tax increment is the amount that's paid to the developer, and where our obligation, the city's obligation, is just related to the amount of those tax increments that are received over the life of the TIF.
Okay. That kind of led to my second question. So the certification of costs would be a different process than in a typical TIF, but would be established by that development or developer's agreement?
That's correct. Currently, when the TIFs that we have, which concern the infrastructure costs, they're certified as by the finance office with the help of Patsy before any amounts are paid. In this case, it would be a little different since we're not paying for the infrastructure. We're giving the grant for the build out of the additional workspace. So the certification of those costs would be related to what those, to make sure that those workspaces or that area is actually being developed. That's the information that we would need before payments are made, and that would be covered in the development agreement.
Thank you. And the last question, the costs included interest, is that portion, the financing of this TIF, is that the same as a regular TIF where it's, a loan's taken out for the costs up front and then paid down by the tax increment payments?
Yes, well, normally interest is part of the TIF cost. In this case, it's a little bit different, and because Black Hills Corp, and they can speak to these details, are borrowing from their own, or borrowing from another entity that they're connected to, but interest is included as part of that because they won't have that money available to them, and staff thought that that was an appropriate cost in this case.
Sure. Joel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joel Landine. I'm the city attorney. That was something that we actually discussed with Black Hills Corp. It is a little unusual. In the typical tax increment district, the developer is not self-financing the project, so they go out and they get a traditional loan, and they have specific financing costs. And traditionally, although there are some previous tax increment districts that we could point to where we have paid interest, and honestly, if the city has done a project and we've upfronted the money and then paid ourselves back, generally we will pay ourselves back interest on that money. So it's not completely unusual, but it is different than a normal tax increment district. What we had discussed, so Black Hills Corp originally proposed this and said, we would like to build out these extra spaces, but without an economic incentive, we just don't think it makes sense for us to do that now. If you want to speed up these jobs coming to Rapid City, we could do that. We initially discussed looking at it as just a flat grant for an amount that would get that done. But $2.5 million or $3 million isn't easy to find lying around. So we started looking at the TIF as the avenue to make the grant happen. And I know some of you may be aware initially we were looking at paying for the infrastructure instead because that's what we had traditionally done. But as the process developed, we decided to, because the grant, and looked at how that had been used in the past, that because what we were really trying to get was the additional build out of spaces rather than try to pay for the infrastructure to get the spaces, it would make more sense if we could do it just to pay for the spaces. So we started discussing it. If we had given them a grant, they would have the money right now and they would be able, and they wouldn't need to borrow. They have a line of credit. They're going to use their business line of credit to finance this, so they will be paying interest. However, instead of getting the money right now, they're going to build it out today, but then they're going to have to wait for repayment of that money for under the projected revenue generated by the 3 tax increment districts. and how that's hopefully going to pay out, they're going to have to wait 5 years before they ever see any probably reimbursement for the money they've expended on that. So unlike a grant, they're going to have to carry that money for, it's going to be 5, 6, and until it's all paid off, 17 years potentially. Hopefully it will pay off sooner than that, but it looks like that's potentially how long it's going to pay off. So there is a cost to that money to them. They're not getting a grant right now, so they're taking some risk in investing this money now in the expansion at this time, hoping to essentially get their, because the district is just their property, what will really happen is in the future, when they make their tax payment, it's going to come back to them to pay off this expansion that they're doing now, but it's going to be down the road. So it is somewhat of a risk for them. So they did ask for an interest payment on that. And like I said, while it's not typical, it is something we have done before, and most notably when the city is upfront of the money, we've generally, again, paid ourselves back interest. So it's not, it is a little different, but it's not completely unheard of either.
Thank you. I appreciate the time answering those questions. I don't have any further. Seeing nothing else from the commission, we'll act on the motion. The motion is to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 13 is an initial plan development to allow a 99-room hotel to be located on property within Buffalo Crossing, which is located south of Catron and east of US Highway 16. The hotel that is proposed is a Holiday Inn and Suites. It is on your non-consent agenda because they are asking for a height exception. In general commercial, you are allowed to have a 4-story, 45-foot structure. They are proposing a 4-story, 52-foot structure. We're trying to get back to the agenda, however. We can go this route too.
Let's try that.
You think you got it?
Let's try the laptop.
Perfect. Let's see if it works. So the previous slide showed that the property is currently within a general commercial zoning district, and it is in a planned development designation. Aerial of the property today. The future land use plan shows that this is a mixed-use commercial area, so the proposed use is right in line with what we were hoping we'd see on the site. A major street plan showing that Healing Way to the east is a collector street. Caregivers Drive is going to be the actual access that runs along the north lot line of this site, and it's a cul-de-sac street, which you see on the layout and master plan before you. We have seen a plat that shows these lots laying out as are identified, and that has been before the Planning Commission, and you have approved that item previously. This is a layout of the site. They are meeting all of their parking requirements. The hotel is sitting as far back on the site as it can. This is looking at the 4-story hotel structure itself, and in particular they're asking for the height exception just for the styling of the roof and for the expansion of the stories that is the common norm today in hotel development. As we look at the surrounding area, we can see that this is into the site, and you can see that there's just pre-construction going on. The sign showing that it has been posted on the property. This is looking west on Catron Boulevard. There at the intersection is where you're going to see Black Hills Corp. And if you recall, when you approved their plan development, you approved a height exception, I believe, for 75 feet on that site. This is looking east, and you can see some of the residential development that exists to the east of this property, and again into the site. As we look at the topographic terrain in this area, the small adjustment to the height will have a minimal impact on the residential development to the east. It certainly is in keeping with line with the other exceptions that have already been granted. Knowing that it's in the spirit of what the future land use plan showed for the area, We are recommending that the height exception from 45 feet to 52 feet be allowed so that we do get that architectural styling along the roof line. This is an initial. They will bring in a final once it's determined by the Planning Commission if you are in support of the height exception. With that, we are recommending to approve the use of the hotel with the height exception of 52 feet. If you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions or comments from the Planning Commission? Galen made the motion to approve. Mark seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving item 13 with the height exception, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 14.
Item number 14 is a major amendment to a plan development to allow a commercial office building with reduced setbacks. The previous major amendment was approved in December 10th, 2015. This is the location of the property. It's zoned office commercial district with planned development. And we're frozen again. The previous major amendment approved a one-story office building on both of these lots. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the lots and put a lot line through the middle of the building. Here's the future land use map. Founders Park Drive is identified as a collector street, and the plat shows dedication of additional right-of-way. A minimal amendment was previously approved to reduce the setback to 20.5 feet on this once the right-of-way is taken, or dedicated, rather. This is the proposed, or the site plan. The structure is currently under construction. You can see where the lot line is proposed to be through here. And so in order to put that lot line there, an exception is needed to reduce the side yard setback to 0 feet. They're addressing the construction of the building through building code and any water and sewer, et cetera, through the platting of the property. Since the exception request is to put the lot line through the middle of the building as it exists, and shouldn't have any negative impacts, and they've got their floodplain development permit for this and the building permit, staff recommends that the major amendment be approved with stipulations noted in the staff report. I'll let you know that on the consent calendar we had an initial plan development for that proposed lot 4, which is right there for another one-story office building. There were no exceptions requested, and you'll probably see that one come back through when they do a final plan development. To give you, let's see if we can see this, but these are pictures of the building under construction today. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Commissioner Skull?
I just have a quick one. So Lot 5 was going to have one building of about 7,000 square feet. So what we're doing is we're basically creating a condo line. Outside of that, it's still about 7,000 square feet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And they've shown that they're able to meet their landscaping requirements, and parking has been decided through it's all shared parking, and they're within the limits of that parking.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this item? Being none, a motion? Andy made the motion to approve. Karen seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 15.
Mr. Chair, item number 15 is a major amendment to a plan development to allow a mixed-use commercial development with on-sale liquor. The red on-sale liquor sign was not posted on the property as required. So with that, we are recommending that this item be continued to your March 24th Planning Commission meeting, and the sign will be posted for this next meeting.
Okay. Karen made the motion to continue. Galen seconded. All those in favor of continuation of March 24th, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Item is continued. Item number 16.
Mr. Chair, I'll be abstaining from item 16.
And Mr. Chair, I will also, and just to also note on the motion for item 12.
Oh, shoot.
We both were recused. Okay.
I promised Karen I would make that clear, but I did not. So item number 16.
We'll see if this works. Item number 16 is an initial plan development. We already spoke to the rezoning from general commercial district to office commercial district. Currently, it's zoned general commercial district with a plan development. The applicant is proposing to construct an apartment complex with 8 structures, a total of 160 apartment units, and an amenity / office building for the complex. Currently, the property's undeveloped. You can see Moon Meadows Drive is built on to the north. There's an access easement along this east property line taking down to Sammy's Trail, and then Sammy's Trail on the south side. The future land use plan identifies the property as mixed-use commercial. You can see US Highway 16 is an entrance corridor, and right at Moon Meadows Drive is a community activity center. In the mixed-use commercial district, higher density residential is identified as a secondary use, and this community activity center looks for a mix of uses, commercial and residential, to support each other. As you can see, Moon Meadows is identified as a arterial street, and a future road to the north would be a collector street. I believe that would be called Healing Way. Here's the site plan. Along the north, Moon Meadows Drive as it's constructed. We got access from Moon Meadows Drive, and then down onto Sammy's Trail. This is the location of that access easement. The applicant has also submitted a preliminary subdivision plan, which isn't before you today because they're still working through some issues, but the access will be dealt with, and drainage as well through that preliminary subdivision plan and platting process. The main reason this is on the non-consent agenda is because the applicant is requesting an exception to allow a maximum height of 3 stories and 40 feet in lieu of the maximum height of 3 stories and 35 feet. As Vicki noted before, this is actually a reduction in the height from what it's currently zoned general commercial, where the maximum height allowed is 45 feet. So they're asking for 40 feet. We let the applicant's aware that they'll need to submit a final plan development in the future, and they'll have to take into account a lot of things that we've included as stipulations of approval, such as providing a more in-depth drainage plan, accounting for some additional parking, and providing a landscaping plan. This is primarily to get that exception to allow the height of 40 feet in lieu of 35 feet. You're not asking for an additional story. It's architectural. And let me take you to the elevation showing what they're proposing. So the where they have to measure on the roof line is from the median of that higher point, and that would be that 45 feet. The previous page was the master plan showing Lot 3 is the higher density residential, and the remainder of the lots identified for more commercial uses. So this will be sort of that buffer between lower density to the east and south and the heavier commercial uses more adjacent to the Moon Meadows and US Highway 16 intersection and that corridor. And it's all been approved or is identified as a community activity center. As part of the construction of Moon Meadows Drive, a traffic impact study was submitted identifying a maximum of 240 apartment units being able to be served by the layout of Moon Meadows Drive. The applicant's only proposing 160 rather than the 240, so it's within those criteria from the traffic impact study. Staff is recommending that the initial plan development be approved, including the exception to allow the height of 40 feet. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
I've got a quick one. Is there access to that property on the south side of it as well as the major?
They do show an access off onto Sammy's Trail.
Thank you.
As I said, through the preliminary subdivision plan, the dedication of right-of-way and construction of the streets will be identified and what they need to build. So, and it might change the final plan development. So the initial is just getting the concept of 160 units and the height of 40 feet, and they'll come back forward with a final plan development with more information as far as what they need to address.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, you noted that you'd like to speak to this item as well. Would you like to do so?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this will this show up.
Oh my gosh, yeah, turn it around to face you. This will be a first, Casey, using a smartphone.
That's all I had.
It's good enough.
First of all, thank you for indulging me with the history of the corridor. I appreciate that indulgence. I took this picture on the way in. I think that and that lower level will go away. This is at the corner of Samus and the access road to Moon Meadows Drive. You can see to the left the telephone pole. I suspect that's right at the 40-foot level. You can see to the right the dirt pile that has resulted from some of the excavation. I'm going to try to give you another picture once you are familiar with that, of the impact that that'll have on the houses to the east. Yeah. This is a little harder to see, as you can tell, but this is from that access road looking to the east. So you see the differential between the heights at the residential area to the east. I'm sitting where the dirt pile is, and you note how the telephone pole relates to that. So essentially what's going to happen is the views to the west for the residential area are going to be gone. That's a major concern for the neighbors, both in terms of property values and the aesthetic value. As I previously noted, I'd like to use the map to show some of the access issues, please. We felt like notice was a little inadequate there. I know it probably meets the rules, and I respect that. But we're concerned with the traffic. I see the traffic warrants have been put together. Yes. But if you note, how do you mark this?
Let's go ahead and drop this down.
Okay.
And give you the authority to write.
I have the authority to write.
Authority to write.
The area just marked has been cut off from access to Highway 16. So what happens is 600 maybe 600 people here, and the neighbors all have to get out that way. That's a concern for me in terms of safety if there's a fire. You have forested areas down here, and this is all grass. We've had fires out there before. So I'm not thrilled about that plan in and of itself. I think it's going to have a negative impact on property values and the views there. I would ask that you reconsider the height. I don't know about the density. I know the architecture is an important thing. But all of these factors, I think, need to be considered pretty strongly. I would not support the height differential. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't. Any other commissioners? I don't see any.
All right,
Thank you,
thank
Mr.
you.
Peterson. Questions or comments from the commission on this item? The initial plan development? I guess my comments would be somewhere along the line of my earlier question to Fletcher. There are some concerns about access, but since we're seeing a final plan development for this, which will establish the access for the project at that point, that's the point, I think, to go through that issue. Anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion on that. Galen moves to approve item 16.
Second.
Jan seconds. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Item number 17.
Item number 17 is an ordinance amendment to allow microbreweries as a conditional use in the Central Business District. They are currently allowed as a conditional use in General Commercial District, and they're allowed as an associated use to a restaurant or bar in the Central Business District, but not as a standalone use. We've had a lot of inquiries recently that there has been interest of putting standalone microbreweries with tasting centers in them. It seems to be the craze. You see them throughout the nation. Many cities will see them actually clustered together, and they kind of feed off of one another. And so as we looked at our ordinance, we certainly saw that if we could implement the same design standards that limits the capacity of what they can produce, which also limits then the industrial nature of the use and the truck traffic, et cetera, it would be appropriate for the Central Business District. As you know, the Firehouse has a microbrewery, but they're first a restaurant and bar, and the microbrewery is secondary to it. This would allow them or some other company to come in and develop downtown in the Central Business District as a standalone microbrewery. As you look at the ordinance that Carla drafted for us, you'll see that the same design standards as we now have in place for general commercial are called out, and the one that really does assist us with the size is the 5,000 barrels of malt beverage a year. It requires that there be a malt beverage manufacturer's license as required by the state as well. Because it would then be a conditional use, it would have to meet all the criteria for the conditional use. Is it keeping in character with the neighborhood? And it's also an on sale, so we get to look at how close is it to a church or residential, et cetera. We felt that this would be appropriate at this time as we see throughout the country the uses change in downtown areas, and we are recommending that this amendment be approved as presented. If you have any questions, let me know.
Commissioner Skull?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I picked up this strange magazine in an airport over the weekend, and I was reading it on the plane back, but there was an article about, it wasn't titled How to Make America Great Again, but it was talking about how to bring, disjointed America back together, per se. But anyway, the article was pretty positive in the sense where they really talked about how maybe at a federal level there's a lot of chaos, but where they're finding greatnesses in communities and how they're rallying around each other and how they're developing. And the article is really about this couple who's kind of made a life out of flying around the country in a little plane, studying different communities, and Rapid City was one of the places they visited.
Wow.
The article did have a lot more on Sioux Falls, but the bottom line is that at the end of the article, they talk about the 11 kind of patterns of greatness within communities, and number 11 was having microbreweries. And the point being is because it shows a cultural diversification that's supported by the other 10 elements. So I found that very interesting, so I wanted to say that. But I would ask maybe we consider to take this a step further and be ahead of the curve. I think the new trend might be moving towards micro distilleries. And so I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to also talk about amending an ordinance to allow a micro distillery, or if that would be something you'd want to wait and see if somebody would be interested in actually doing that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly we can look at that, Andy. We appreciate that you would consider what's on the agenda today, but we can certainly take a look at that. And no, we have not had any inquiries about that yet.
One question, Vicki. If I remember right, a while back we approved, and I don't recall if it was an ordinance or if it was just connected to the property, but regarding the Firehouse's wine operation, is that a similar step to allow a small winemaking operation in central business?
We did an ordinance amendment several years ago that did allow that winery to take place in central business, and again, it's limited by capacity, but this would be catching up with that.
That sounds like a good idea. Thanks. Any other questions, comments on the items? Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm following along with Andy's comment on the use of downtowns is changing, and I think this definitely will bring people downtown. It's something different, and I think that's a good thing. And I also was in Florida last year, and they had a specialty shop that sold alcohol, hard alcohol, and it was something that they made right there, and it was just, people just flocked to that place, and it was just so interesting. And I agree with Andy that I think we should take a look at the distilleries. I think that's not a bad idea.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion on the proposed ordinance amendment. Andy makes the motion, Linda seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any discussions items, staff items?
We do. Today is going to be Brett's last Planning Commission meeting, and as staff, we just wanted to take the opportunity to thank him for all that he's brought to Rapid City and all the ordinance amendments and streamlining the process that you've seen before you. As you've witnessed yourself, those of you who've been on here a while, the agendas have significantly decreased over the years. The reduction of committees that have come about as a part of his initiation of action. And so for that, we wanted to thank Brett and thank you for joining us this morning. And we did bring cookies for everyone to enjoy just to celebrate today. And thanks for all that you've done, Brett.
Yeah, we echo that. Thanks very much, Brett. We appreciate your service. It's been a fun few years, and maybe it always is, though.